wonderful thing about finding out about food triggers is that you actually can make a difference in your health. And there's something really empowering about that, especially when, migraines seem to just hit you from nowhere and they take you out for 2 or 3 days and your life is just, you're feeling miserable. And then you're, maybe at the mercy of medication, which may or may not work, and you're not supposed to take it too often. And there's, it's not a great cycle to be in. And so when I now can feel well most of the time, that's awesome. And so, we eat 3 to 5, 6 times a day. So that's the biggest portion of our control is what we put into our mouths. Well, if you have been to a migraine doctor, oftentimes they will give you a sheet that tells you, it's usually called the low-tyramine diet. And they'll say, eat the foods in this column and don't eat the foods in this column. And then they send you home. And that's not super helpful because it's a pretty restricted list. And there's also no kind of plan of attack, like how do I do this and what is tyramine and why is it causing headaches or is it causing headaches? And that's kind of the boat that I was in last year. So I started researching, and I've been researching for the last year and a half. I've read every single migraine book out there. I have read probably 75 medical journal articles about migraine and diet. And I'm putting all that together into an online program that will be available soon, as well as a book that I'm writing. About 2 or 3 weeks in, I realized when I was waking up in the morning that I didn't have a headache. And that was the first time I'd realized that I'd had a headache every single day for a long time, maybe years. And part of the issue for me was that I was eating what I thought was a super healthy diet. I didn't eat a lot of processed food. I didn't have caffeine, but I did have a lot of aged and fermented foods because those are supposed to be super healthy. So it was frustrating at first because I felt like, wow, I thought I was doing all these things right for my health, and here I am, unfortunately not really doing what seems to be well for my head and maybe causing my own, to some degree, causing my migraines. Anyway, I want to talk about cheese because that's something that you hear about. And the reason that cheese is an issue for people who get migraine is because it contains something called tyramine. And if you're like me, you've never heard of tyramine before. So tyramine, what is that? Well, it's actually the amino acid tyrosine, which is naturally found in food, breaks down into a compound called tyramine. And that tyramine, that compound is what's called a vasoactive or a pressor amine. And all that means is that it acts on the vascular system, meaning that it dilates vessels. Now, they're not exactly sure why that might cause headaches, but cheese has been well documented to cause headaches. And in fact, I do get a cheese headache. If I eat cheese, I actually get a headache pretty much within 10 minutes. So what might be happening? There's 3 theories. One is that it's dilating the blood vessels, and that's causing issues in your brain, and it's a direct vascular effect. The second theory is that when that dilation happens, it causes an inflammatory response, and it's those inflammatory chemicals coming in that might be conducive to migraines getting triggered. And the third is that these active compounds might be generating or causing the release of other neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine. And when that happens, it can cause something called cortical spreading depression, which has nothing to do with depression, but it means that it's a wave of neurotransmitter activity that crosses the brain. And depending on what functions it hits when it crosses, and this happens in milliseconds, then that is the type of symptoms that you get. So for me, I don't get aura, but I get horrible light sensitivity, and I was getting vertigo attacks, and I get ear symptoms, and that's because apparently my cortical spreading depression hits that part of my brain. Okay, so is it bad if you eat a lot of cheese? Well, it depends on whether or not you're getting migraine or getting migraine attacks. So let me talk about what cheeses are okay to eat and which are not, and why. So this thing called tyramine, it builds up in foods when they're aged and fermented. And so a softer cheese like feta might be okay, although it's kind of borderline because it's been aged for a little while. The cheeses that you want to avoid are things like Parmesan, cheddar. I have a Gouda made from goat cheese. And do you see how the cheese, the harder the cheese is, or a blue cheese, not good for migraine? Okay, you can still choose to eat them. It's just I'm trying to let people know like what might be causing your migraine attacks, and if you're getting Like I know people will get 3 to 5 attacks a week, and when they cut back on cheese, now then it's down to 1 a week. Wow, that's a huge improvement in the quality of their life. So what you want to be eating are soft, fresh cheeses. So cream cheese is okay. Fresh goat cheese, probably okay. It's one that you kind of maybe need to test for yourself. Ricotta cheese is generally considered to be fine. Cottage cheese. And then if you can find fresh mozzarella, the kind that's floating in water, meaning that it was recently made, or make it yourself, which it's actually very easy to do, those are fine. So if you want to do pizza, you can still do pizza with a fresh mozzarella, or even with dollops of ricotta on there would be fine. Yep. One of the interesting new studies that are coming out have to do with allergies and migraine. And it seems like, although there's very few studies, only 2 or 3 that I found, that migraine sufferers tend to have a higher incidence of food allergies. So there may be way higher incidence of dairy allergy in migraine sufferers than in the regular population. And so one theory is that, while I said that migraine is not an allergic response, what may be happening is that when you're eating something in your body regularly that your body is sensitive to, then your body is creating antibodies. It's creating that inflammatory response. And when that happens, it makes your brain more easily triggered because it's more sensitive. There's more stuff going on up there. So that's why you may want to cut back on cheese or try eliminating it altogether. And you may want to try going dairy-free for a month or 2 and see what happens. Everybody is different. So a queso blanco or queso fresco should be okay as long as that person doesn't have a sensitivity to the wheat protein, or the whey protein, milk protein. So I just really encourage you to follow me on Facebook, on Twitter. I'm S. Weaver, MPH. MPH stands for Masters of Public Health. So S. Weaver, MPH on Periscope and Twitter. RecipeRenovator.com is my website where I have tons of recipes and information about special diets, including the migraine diet. I also want to shout out to Perry Girls, who are a great supportive group of women on Periscope. And follow me on Facebook at Stephanie Weaver, MPH. So you'll get lots of tips.